Two families move on to the same block on the same Saturday. The Nguyen's arrive first, Hoa and Minh, Vietnamese immigrants. She works at a nail salon. He drives a delivery truck. Combined income, $52,000 a year. They carry two suitcases, a rice cooker, and a rule. Hua's mother pressed it into her hands at the airport in Saigon in 1979, the day they left Vietnam for the last time. The government had just collapsed. The currency had failed overnight. Neighbors who had borrowed money lost everything twice, once when their jobs disappeared, and again when the debt they owed kept standing long after everything else had fallen. Her mother held her face and said, "The money in your hand is the only money that is real. Everything else is a promise, and promises break." The Garcias arrived that same afternoon, Roberto and Linda. He is a contractor. He builds houses for a living. She works at the school district. Combined income, $54,000. Their furniture arrives on a payment plan, meaning they will pay for it in small amounts over several months instead of all at once. Their refrigerator is financed, same idea. Borrowed money to buy it today and pay it back later. Roberto carries a credit card with a $5,000 limit and a philosophy his father taught him while laying roads in Texas in 1961. You borrow to build. That is how America works. Same block, same year. Two families within $2,000 of each other in income. Two completely different answers to one question. What is money? Follow these two families for the next 35 years, through booms, through crashes, through laws written in Washington by politicians who never met them, and you will understand something that no school ever teaches clearly. Money is never just money. Money is a belief system, and the belief system you inherit from your parents, from your country, from the history that shaped them both, determines not just how you spend, it determines what kind of future you are allowed to build. This is the story of two belief systems, the country that built itself on choosing one over the other, the law written to protect you inside whichever one you choose, and why almost nobody knows that law exists. Part 1. Cash culture. What it is and where it comes from. Hoa keeps 3 envelopes in the kitchen drawer. Rent, food, emergency. Every Friday, Minh comes home. They cash his paycheck, meaning they exchange the paper check from his employer for actual dollar bills, at the bank on the corner. The envelopes get their portions first. What remains is the week's spending money. When the food envelope empties, the family eats rice and eggs until Friday. The kitchen smells of lemongrass and fish sauce. Nothing in the house is owed to anyone. This is not poverty. This is not ignorance. This is memory made into method. Cash culture means this: you only spend money you already physically have. You do not borrow. You do not use credit. If the money is not in your hand right now, you wait until it is. And cash culture is never born in comfort. It is always born in collapse. To understand why, look at 3 countries where this philosophy runs deepest. Germany, 1923. Germany is fighting a debt so enormous from World War I that it begins printing money to pay it. Printing money, meaning the government creates new bills without any real value behind them, causes what economists call hyperinflation. Here is what hyperinflation means in plain life. Prices double every 4 days. Workers are paid twice daily, morning and afternoon, because the money they earn at breakfast is worth less by dinner. A single loaf of bread eventually cost 200 billion marks, the German currency at the time. People fill wheelbarrows with bills just to buy groceries, not because they are wealthy, because the currency itself has become nearly worthless paper. That year ends, but the memory does not. Germany builds the Bundesbank, its central bank, meaning the government institution that controls money supply and interest rates, with one legal instruction above all others: never let inflation happen again.
We have to work together.
A central bank, by the way, is not a regular bank where you deposit your salary. It is the bank that controls the entire country's money system. It sets the rules for all other banks. You never visit it, but it controls the price of everything you buy. Germany's cash culture, its high savings rates, its distrust of debt, all of it traces back to one year, 1923. Japan, post-war. Japan is a collection of islands, small land, limited natural resources, a geography that demands conservation. When you cannot expand outward, when there is no new land to develop, no new frontier to borrow against, you conserve inward. Japan's household savings rate, meaning the percentage of income families set aside rather than spend, consistently ranked among the highest in the developed world. Not because of moral discipline, because of geography. Islands teach patience in a way that continents never have to. India, 1991. India's foreign exchange reserves, meaning the supply of foreign currency, especially US dollars, that the government holds to pay international debts, fall so low that the government physically flies gold to London as collateral for an emergency loan. Collateral means something of value you give temporarily to a lender to prove you can repay. If you cannot repay, they keep the collateral. India was putting up its national gold supply just to borrow enough money to survive. Credit, meaning borrowed money, vanishes from the Indian economy almost overnight. Middle-class families who had borrowed find themselves exposed without shelter. The memory of that crisis still shapes Indian middle-class attitudes toward debt a generation later. Save first. Borrow reluctantly. Never depend on a system you cannot control. Cash culture is always the same story. The system failed. People suffered. Survivors passed down one instruction: hold what you can hold. Hoa's mother was one of those survivors. Her 3 envelopes were not primitive. They were the most sophisticated financial technology her experience had produced. Part 2. Credit culture. What it is and where it comes from. Roberto Garcia's kitchen smells of coffee and sawdust. On his wall hangs a photograph of his father laying highway asphalt in Texas. 1961, hands rough, expression proud. His father's rule: you borrow to build. That is how America works. He was right. Credit culture means this: you spend money you do not yet have, borrowed from a bank or lender, with a promise to pay it back over time, usually with interest. Interest means the extra money you pay for the privilege of borrowing. If you borrow $1,000 and repay $1,100 over 1 year, that extra $100 is the interest. It is the price of using tomorrow's money today. And to understand why Roberto's father was right, why credit culture is not recklessness, but rational strategy for a specific geography, you have to understand what America physically is. Not a country, a continent. In the 1840s, moving from Ohio to California required a wagon, horses, tools, seeds, months of food, and equipment for terrain nobody had mapped. Almost nobody had all of that in savings, so they borrowed. The entire westward expansion of the United States was financed on credit. The railroads connecting the continent in the 1860s, costing roughly $100 million, were funded by government bonds and European investors. A government bond is when a government borrows money from investors by issuing a certificate. The certificate says, give us money today, and we will pay you back in 10 or 30 years with interest. The railroad companies and the U.S. government issued bonds, collected the money, built the railroads, and paid investors back from the profits the railroads generated. The cattle ranches of Texas, the wheat farms of Kansas, the oil fields of Oklahoma, all built on borrowed capital staked against future production. A small country with fixed borders can grow slowly on accumulated savings. Switzerland can do this. Denmark can do this. Their physical scale makes patience viable. Their populations are stable. Their resources are mapped. Time is available. America could not afford patience. America was a continent being settled at industrial speed before other powers could claim it. The frontier demanded capital faster than any savings culture could generate. And so America reached forward into tomorrow and borrowed tomorrow's money to build today's railroads. Roberto Garcia did not choose credit culture. He inherited it from a nation that had been practicing it since before it had a name. Part 3. 3 moments that built the world. Ochoa and Roberto live in 1929, the crash that split America in half. By the late 1920s, installment credit, meaning the ability to buy things and pay in small monthly amounts, has transformed American life. 60% of all cars purchased this way. Radios, refrigerators, pianos, all now within reach of ordinary families for the first time. Then comes the stock market crash of 1929. The stock market is a place where people buy and sell small pieces of companies called shares or stocks. When investors believe companies will do well, stock prices rise. When they panic and sell all at once, prices collapse. In 1929, that panic was catastrophic and nationwide. Between 1930 and 1933, over 9,000 American banks fail. People walk to their bank on an ordinary Tuesday morning and find a locked door and a handwritten sign. Savings accumulated over years. Gone. Not spent, not wasted. Simply gone because the institution holding them had collapsed. This creates two Americas that will coexist for generations. Americans who never trust banks or credit again. They keep cash in coffee cans. They teach their children that debt is moral failure. And Americans who conclude the opposite, that the Depression proved the government needed to spend more boldly, borrow more confidently, and intervene faster. Ochoa's mother is the first psychology. Roberto's father is the second. Both were shaped by the same event. Both reached opposite conclusions. Both were right about something. Both were incomplete about something. 1971, the Sunday night that changed what money is. August 15, 1971, President Nixon appears on television. He announces that America will no longer exchange dollars for gold. This sounds like a minor banking adjustment. It is one of the most consequential decisions in modern economic history. Before this moment, every dollar in existence was theoretically backed by gold stored at Fort Knox. The supply of money was constrained by a physical object. This system was called the gold standard. It meant the government could only print as many dollars as it had gold to back them. You could theoretically walk to a bank and exchange your dollars for actual gold. This kept the money supply limited and the value of dollars relatively stable. After Nixon's announcement, the dollar is backed by nothing except trust, by the collective belief that America is stable, that its economy is productive, and that its dollars will retain value. This is called fiat currency, from the Latin word meaning, let it be done. Money that exists because a government declares it exists, not because gold or silver sits behind it in a vault. Think of it this way. Before 1971, a dollar was like a receipt for a specific piece of gold that actually existed. After 1971, a dollar is more like a promise, valuable because everyone agrees it is valuable, not because a physical object backs it. What does this mean for credit? When money was tied to gold, debt had a physical ceiling. You could only lend as much as the gold supply allowed. When money becomes pure trust, that ceiling disappears. Banks can create more money by making more loans. The supply of credit becomes theoretically unlimited. The explosion of consumer credit cards, mortgages, car loans, and government borrowing in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s is not an accident. It is the direct consequence of one Sunday evening announcement. Roberto's first credit card arrived in 1987. It became possible in 1971. 1981, the year credit culture captured the government. Ronald Reagan enters the White House with a theory called supply-side economics. Supply-side economics argues that if you cut taxes, especially for businesses and wealthy individuals, those people will invest the money they save, create jobs, and grow the economy so much that the government actually collects more in taxes overall, despite the lower rates. The idea is that growing the economic pie makes up for the smaller slice the government takes. Critics call it trickle-down economics, meaning benefits to the wealthy are supposed to eventually trickle down to everyone else. Reagan cuts taxes by $750 billion over 5 years. He simultaneously increases military spending by $1.5 trillion. The gap between what the government spends and what it collects, called the budget deficit, explodes. A deficit means spending more than you earn. A surplus means earning more than you spend. When a government runs deficits year after year, the total amount it owes, the national debt, keeps growing. The national debt, which took America 200 years to reach $1 trillion, doubles in 8 years. Cash culture conservatives are furious. Senator Barry Goldwater, the man who defined modern American conservatism, calls it reckless. Senator Bob Dole proposes modest tax increases to address the growing deficit. He is politically destroyed for suggesting it. Credit culture has won the politics, not just the economy. And here is why this matters for every conversation you will ever hear about government money. Every argument about infrastructure spending, student loan forgiveness, healthcare, defense, and climate investment is the same argument in new clothes. Cash culture says, collect the money first, then spend it. A government should not spend what it does not have. Credit culture says, invest now, growth pays for it later. Waiting for savings means waiting forever. Neither has permanently won, because neither is permanently wrong. Part 4. The economics nobody explains. The invisible tax on patience. Here is the most important economic truth in this entire video, and almost nobody teaches it. Credit culture produces inflation. Here is what that means in plain language. When banks lend money, when they extend credit to millions of people simultaneously, they create new spending power in the economy. More people can buy things. Demand increases. But the supply of goods, the number of cars, houses, phones, and groceries that exist, does not increase as fast as the new spending power. When more money chases the same amount of goods, sellers raise prices. That is inflation, the general rise in prices over time, which means each dollar you hold buys slightly less than it did before. A simple example. If there are 10 apples and $10 in the world, each apple costs $1. If suddenly there are $20 but still only 10 apples, each apple now costs $2. The apples did not change, the money changed. That is inflation. Now here is the cruel irony that nobody talks about. Inflation punishes cash culture families most. Follow this carefully. The Nguyen's saved for 30 years. 3 envelopes, retirement accounts, patient, disciplined accumulation. Every dollar they save is a fixed claim on future purchasing power. When inflation runs at 7%, as it did across America in 2022, every dollar they saved the previous year now buys 7% less. Their discipline is being taxed invisibly, not by the government, not by any law they signed, by the structural consequence of living inside a credit culture economy they chose not to participate in. Now look at the Garcias. They have a fixed-rate mortgage, meaning they borrowed a specific amount to buy their house, and their monthly payment is locked at the same number regardless of what the economy does. Fixed rate means the interest rate does not change for the life of the loan. If you borrow at 6%, you pay 6% whether the economy is booming or crashing. Your payment stays the same. As inflation rises, the dollars they earn each month are worth less in real terms. But the mortgage payment they owe, $180,000 total, is denominated in those same inflating dollars, which means their debt, measured in cheaper dollars, becomes progressively easier to repay. Inflation transfers wealth from savers to borrowers. The Nguyen's, who followed every rule of patience and discipline, are quietly subsidizing the Garcias, who followed the rules of leverage and optimism. Nobody designed this outcome. Nobody voted for it. But it is the structural reality of a credit culture economy, and it is almost never explained to the people it affects most. Part 5. The law that was supposed to protect both families. In 1968, Congress passed a law that most Americans have signed under and never knew existed, the Truth in Lending Act, 1968, also called TILA. Before TILA, lenders could advertise credit in any way they chose. A car dealer might advertise $50 a month without telling you the loan lasted 10 years. The total interest was enormous, and there were hidden fees buried in the contract. People signed agreements they did not understand for costs that were never clearly stated. TILA made 4 disclosures legally mandatory before any credit agreement can be signed. Number 1, the annual percentage rate, APR. This is the true yearly cost of borrowing, expressed as a single percentage that includes not just interest, but all fees. If a credit card charges 18% interest, but also charges a $95 annual fee, the APR reflects both. It lets you compare 2 different credit products on exactly the same terms. Before TILA, lenders could hide costs in ways that made expensive products look cheap. Number 2, the total finance charge. Every dollar you will pay in interest and fees over the entire life of the loan added up into one number. If you borrow $10,000 and over 5 years pay back $14,500 total, the finance charge is $4,500. That is the actual cost of borrowing. Number 3, the total amount financed. Exactly how much you are actually borrowing, not including fees that are paid up front. Number 4, the total of all payments. Every dollar you will pay back from first payment to last, principal plus interest plus fees, combined into one number. This is the number that should stop people in their tracks. A $300,000 mortgage at 7% over 30 years has a total payment figure of approximately $718,000. You borrow $300,000. You pay back $718,000. TILA requires that number to be visible before you sign. These are your legal rights. Before you sign any loan, before you agree to any credit product, you are legally entitled to see all 4 numbers in plain writing. But here's what TILA also gives you, and what almost nobody knows. If a lender violates TILA, fails to disclose accurately, hides fees, misrepresents the total cost, you have the legal right to rescind certain loans within 3 years of signing. Rescind means cancel, undo, walk away as if it never happened. Not 3 days, 3 years. For mortgages on your primary residence where TILA was violated, you can demand the loan be canceled, all finance charges returned to you, and the lender's legal claim on your home removed. This right exists. It has existed since 1968. Most Americans will never use it because most Americans do not know it is there. Roberto's cousin Marcus signed a mortgage in Phoenix in 2006. He earned $48,000 a year. The house cost $310,000. The mortgage officer was friendly, adjustable rate, started at 5%, monthly payment $1,100. An adjustable rate mortgage, also called an ARM, means the interest rate changes over time based on broader market conditions. It often starts low to attract borrowers. Then it adjusts, usually upward, after a fixed period. Your payment can increase significantly. A compliant TILA disclosure would have shown Marcus that if rates adjusted to their contractual maximum, his total payment obligation over 30 years could reach $580,000. He never saw that number clearly presented. He signed. The rate adjusted. His monthly payment jumped from $1,100 to $1,900. His income had not changed. He missed one payment, then two. The bank foreclosed. Foreclosure means when a borrower cannot make mortgage payments, the lender takes legal possession of the house and sells it to recover their money. The borrower must leave. They lose whatever money they had invested. Their credit score is severely damaged for years. Marcus got a letter. 30 days to vacate the home he had been building a life in. The bank that originated his loan, meaning the bank that gave him the mortgage in the first place, reported record profits in 2007. The bank that held the bundled securities received $25 billion in government bailout funds in 2008. Bundled securities means banks took thousands of individual mortgages like Marcus's and packaged them together into a single financial product that could be sold to investors. This spread the risk, but also meant nobody was carefully watching whether individual borrowers like Marcus could actually afford their loans. Private risk, public cost. The most honest sentence the credit culture ever produced. Part 6. The political fault line that still runs through everything. The 2008 bailout vote in Congress. $700 billion of public money to save the financial system. Cash culture lawmakers vote no. Borrowed risk should not become public obligation. The institutions made bad bets. The institutions should absorb the losses. Moral hazard, meaning the danger that rescuing people from consequences teaches them to take reckless risks again, is real and must be avoided. Moral hazard is an economics term meaning, if you know someone will rescue you from bad decisions, you are more likely to make bad decisions. If a bank knows the government will bail it out when it fails, the bank has less reason to be careful. Credit culture lawmakers vote yes. The system is too interconnected to fail, meaning the failure of major banks would cascade through the economy and destroy millions of ordinary jobs, savings, and businesses that had nothing to do with the reckless behavior. The yes votes win. The banks survive. Marcus rents an apartment in November. He will rent for 11 years before his credit recovers. That fault line, between who bears the cost when the credit culture fails, has not closed. It runs through every election, every budget debate, every argument about student loans, healthcare, infrastructure, and climate investment you will ever watch. You are living inside that fault line right now. Final act, The Porch, 2022. Hua and Min Nguyen own their home outright, paid off in 22 years. Their daughter is a pharmacist. Their son owns 3 properties, each purchased only after the previous one was stable. Family net worth, $1.4 million. Not because they earned more than the Garcias, because they kept more. And because, quietly without intending it, the inflation produced by the credit economy around them made their real estate worth 4 times what they originally paid. Net worth means the total value of everything you own minus everything you owe. If your house is worth $500,000 and you owe $200,000 on it, its contribution to your net worth is $300,000. The system they distrusted made them wealthy. Roberto and Linda Garcia have a different accounting. The 2008 collapse nearly ended the business. They refinanced twice to survive. Refinancing means replacing your existing mortgage with a new one, usually to get a lower interest rate or to access some of the equity, meaning the portion of the home's value you own outright, as cash. It can be a useful tool, but it resets your loan timeline and can extend your debt significantly. They are 62 years old with a mortgage that has 11 years remaining and a retirement account thinner than it should be. But the houses Roberto built still stand. The neighborhoods he constructed still exist. 3 of his crew members bought homes in those neighborhoods and raised families in them. He built real things, things that outlast the debt that funded them. On the porch one evening in 2022, Roberto asks what he has wanted to ask for a long time. If you could do it over, would you do anything different? Hua is quiet. I would have borrowed once, for the first house, earlier. We paid rent for 6 years while the market moved without us. Roberto nods. I would have saved first. 2 years. Just enough to survive one bad year without refinancing everything. I was always one crisis away from losing it all. Neither of them did it wrong. Both of them did it incomplete. Because both of them were handed a philosophy without the manual that should have come with it. The philosophy said, "This is how money works." The manual would have said, "And here are your rights inside that system. Here is what the lender must show you before you sign. Here is what you can demand when they hide it. Here is the law that has protected you since 1968 that nobody told you about." Neither Hua nor Roberto received the manual. Most people never do. Neither family was wrong. Cash culture protects against catastrophe. It keeps the alarm on. It preserves the ability to survive when systems fail. And systems always eventually fail. Credit culture enables speed. It lets ordinary people build extraordinary things, houses, businesses, futures, before their savings can support the dream. America chose credit not because Americans are reckless. America chose credit because it was a continent that needed to be built fast, by people with ambitions larger than their savings, betting on futures they could see but not yet afford. That bet built highways, railroads, technology companies, and the largest economy in human history. The same bet built the housing bubble, the student debt crisis, $33 trillion in national debt, and a generation of families whose monthly payments leave no room for a single emergency. Credit is not evil. Cash is not primitive. They are two answers to one question. How much do you trust the future? But underneath that question is a harder one nobody asks at the kitchen table. Do you know your rights inside whichever system you choose? Because the Truth in Lending Act has existed since 1968. Because Marcus had the legal right to see the total payment obligation before he signed. He did not know. The officer did not volunteer it. And the gap between those two facts, between the right that exists and the knowledge that does not, is where families lose houses, where wealth gaps compound across generations, where the system extracts most deeply from the people it promised to serve. Your parents made a choice about money. They made it with whatever philosophy history handed them. You are about to make yours. The only difference between you and them is that you just received the manual.